Some men go quiet when they're hurt. I've never been one of those men. My whole life, when something cut me deep, I got loud, I said what I meant, and I said it fast. But the night my son-in-law's name showed up on a pawn shop receipt for my late wife's wedding ring, I didn't say a word. I just stood in my garage in Tulsa, Oklahoma, holding a slip of yellow paper, and I understood for the first time in 63 years what it actually feels like to break without making a sound. Right now, I'm sitting in the front row of a courtroom on the third floor of the Tulsa County Courthouse, watching a bailiff walk my daughter's husband past me in a gray jumpsuit, his wrists cuffed in front of him instead of behind, like they do for the nonviolent ones. My daughter, Rachel, is 2 rows back, refusing to look at me. I want you to understand something before I tell you how we got here. I didn't put him in that jumpsuit. He put himself there. I just stopped being the man who kept bailing out his mistakes. 4 years, Grant. 4 years I covered for you. And you thought I'd cover for you forever. The courtroom doors are heavy oak, the kind that close slow and quiet, like the whole building is trying not to disturb anybody's grief. As they lead him out through the side door toward the holding area, Rachel finally turns around in her seat, and her eyes find mine, red-rimmed, furious. "Daddy, how could you do this to us?" I didn't answer her. I just watched the door swing shut behind him. "Welcome, friend. Before we get into it, I want you to know something. Everybody in this story had a chance to do right. They just didn't take it. If you've got a minute, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. It means more to an old man than you'd think. Now let me back this up, because you need the whole picture, and trust me, it isn't what you'd guess from where we started. 6 days before that courtroom, I was closing up my hardware store on Route 66, the one my father opened in 1974, and I've run since he passed it to me at 32. Garrett's Hardware still hand-painted on the window, still smells like sawdust and WD-40 the way it did when I was a boy sweeping the floors for $1 an hour. I locked the register, pulled the gate down over the front glass, and drove my old Ford pickup home the way I do every single evening, past the Baptist church, past the Sonic where Rachel used to work summers in high school, out to the house on Comanche Lane where I raised my daughter and buried my wife's ashes under the maple tree in the backyard. The house is too big for one man now. It's always too quiet now. My wife, Diane, passed 18 months ago. Ovarian cancer, caught late the way it usually is caught. 9 months from the diagnosis to the funeral. And I won't spend a lot of time describing what those 9 months were like. Because if you've lost somebody that way, you already know, and if you haven't, I hope you never learn it firsthand. After she passed, I kept one thing of hers close. Her wedding ring, not the everyday band, the good one. The one I saved 11 months of profits from the store to buy her in 1987. A half-carat solitaire set in white gold that she wore every day of our marriage except the last 2 weeks in the hospital, when her fingers had swollen too much to keep it on. I kept it in a small cedar box on top of my dresser, right next to my reading glasses, and most nights before bed I'd open that box and just look at it. Some nights I'd hold it. Some nights I'd just look. Either way, for about a minute, Diane was alive again in that room with me. That Tuesday night, I opened the box, and it was empty. I want to tell you my first thought was that I'd misplaced it, moved it somewhere and forgotten, but I hadn't. I knew exactly where that box lived, and exactly what should have been sitting in it. I stood there in my bedroom with the lamplight catching nothing but empty red velvet, and I felt something drop out of my chest like a floor giving way beneath a house I thought was solid. I checked my sock drawer. I checked the fireproof lockbox in the closet where I keep our marriage certificate and Diane's death certificate and the store's insurance papers. I checked under the bed, behind the headboard, every place logic said it couldn't possibly be, because some part of me already understood exactly where that ring had gone and exactly who had taken it. There's only one other person who has a key to my house. My daughter, Rachel, and by extension, her husband of 3 years, Grant. I called her. 4 rings before she picked up, and when she did, I could hear a television in the background. Some cooking show, cabinet doors opening and closing. "Hey, Dad," kind of in the middle of something. "Rachel, your mother's ring. Do you know where it is?" There was a pause, just half a second too long. Then, too quick, too smooth. "What ring?" "You know what ring, Rachel? It's gone from the box on my dresser." I heard the television get muted. I heard her breathe out slow, the way she used to when she was 17 and about to tell me something she knew I wasn't going to like. Okay, okay, Dad, before you get upset. Grant needed it. His business, the landscaping company, he's been 3 months behind on the equipment loan, and the bank was about to repossess the trucks. He didn't have a choice. He didn't have a choice, I repeated back to her, slow, the way you'd repeat a sentence in a language you're only half sure you understood. Dad, it's just a ring. It was your mother's ring, Rachel. And Mom's gone, Dad. Her voice cracked, but it wasn't grief cracking it. It was irritation, like I was the unreasonable one for asking. She doesn't need it. Grant needed it. He pawned it Thursday, got 2,200 for it, caught the loan payment up, saved the whole business. I know you're upset, but honestly, it's just sitting in a box collecting dust. At least this way it actually did something. I stood in my kitchen holding a phone gone very quiet on my end. I want you to understand. In 40 years of marriage and 35 years of being a father, I had never once felt a silence sit that heavy in my own chest. She was 3 years old when she lost the little plastic ring out of a gumball machine and cried for 2 days straight like the world had ended. And now, at 29 years old, she'd let her husband walk into my house, into my bedroom, and take her dead mother's wedding ring to pawn like it was a spare car battery. I want to tell you this came out of nowhere. It didn't. Nothing like this ever does. If you're waiting for me to say Grant just snapped one day and did something crazy, that's not what happened. What happened was slower than that, quieter than that. It built one favor at a time, one this is the last time at a time, until 4 years had gone by and I woke up funding a marriage I wasn't sure I even recognized anymore. Let me take you back to where this actually started, because you need to understand the whole shape of it. Rachel met Grant Whitfield at 25. Working the front desk at a gym here in Tulsa, where he trained clients before he decided he wanted to run his own landscaping business instead. He was charming in that way that made you like him before you'd had a chance to think it through. Good handshake, remembered your name, told you your yard looked sharp even when it didn't. Diane liked him. I liked him too. In the beginning. That's the part that's hard to admit now. The landscaping business started with a $15,000 loan from me. No interest. Because that's what fathers do for their kids starting out, or that's what I told myself. Within a year, he needed another $8,000 for a truck repair. I gave it to him. I told myself that's just how small business goes. When Rachel and Grant got married, I paid for half the wedding because Grant's parents weren't in a position to help, and Diane was already 3 months into chemo by then, and wanted so badly to see her only daughter walk down an aisle. I don't regret that. I'd do it again tomorrow. But it never stopped there. A missed mortgage payment here. A truck that needed a transmission there. Every single time, Rachel would call, and every single time, there'd be a story, and every single time, I'd write the check and tell myself I was just being a good father-in-law, the kind of man who shows up for his family. Diane got sick 8 months after the wedding. Aggressive, the doctor said, and it moved through her fast. In the middle of all that, Grant's business had what he called a rough patch, and Rachel asked me for $11,000 to keep the doors of Whitfield Landscaping open while I was driving back and forth to St. Francis Hospital every single day, watching my wife disappear a little more each week. I gave it to them anyway. I told myself grief makes people desperate, and desperate people need grace, not lectures. I buried my wife on a Thursday in April. Grant didn't show up to help carry the casket like he'd promised. Said a client emergency came up. Rachel made excuses for him at the funeral luncheon, and I let her, because I didn't have the strength that week to make it about anything but Diane. After that, it got worse in the quiet way these things get worse. Grant stopped calling me by anything but Pop, like we were old war buddies, instead of a man who owed me now close to $40,000 across 4 years. He'd come to Sunday dinner and spend the whole meal on his phone, texting suppliers, he said, though I noticed the screen glow lit up his face the same way it did when he thought nobody was watching a football score. Rachel stopped calling just to talk. Every call had a number attached to it by the end. I never once asked where the money actually went, because some small, tired part of me was afraid of the answer. Here's what I understand now sitting here telling you this, that I didn't understand then. I thought I was being generous. I thought I was being the kind of father-in-law who didn't hold money over his family's head the way my own father had held it over mine. But I wasn't being generous. I was being used. And somewhere along the way, without either of us really marking the moment it happened, I stopped being Rachel's father in Grant's eyes. I became a line item, a safety net he never once thanked, because you don't thank a net for catching you. You just expect it to be there. The first time I ever told them no, the real first time, 4 years in, was 9 days before the ring disappeared. Grant called asking for $6,000 to buy a used mower attachment he swore would double his contract capacity for spring. I did the math while he talked. $6,000. My store's slow season was already eating into savings I needed for my own retirement. Savings Diane and I had built for 30 years, planning a life together that cancer cut short. I can't do this one, Grant, I told him. I've got my own bills, and frankly, I need to start thinking about myself for once. The reaction on the other end was immediate. Come on, Pop. You're killing me here. Rachel's going to be so disappointed. I thought family took care of family. I am taking care of family, Grant. I'm taking care of me, for the first time in a long while. He hung up without saying goodbye. Rachel called an hour later, and she was crying, saying I was choosing money over her marriage, saying if Grant's business folded it would be on my hands. I told her I was sorry, but the answer was still no. She hung up on me too. I had no idea that 9 days later, Grant would let himself into my house with the spare key I gave them for emergencies, and walk out with the one object on this earth that still smelled, faintly, impossibly, like my wife's perfume. And I had no idea that within 3 days I'd be standing in a pawn shop off Admiral Place, looking through a glass case at the last piece of Diane I had left. Something in me had gone still after that phone call with Rachel. Not angry yet. Still, the way a pot goes still right before the water starts to climb the sides. I hung up my own phone and stood in that kitchen a long time. Then I picked up my keys. Diane's cousin runs a jewelry appraisal business 2 towns over, and I'd had that ring appraised for insurance purposes only 8 months ago, right after the funeral, when I was finally strong enough to go through her things properly. I had photographs. I had the paperwork with the ring's exact specifications, the inscription on the inside of the band D&W, Forever 1987. 22 minutes from my house to that stretch of Admiral Place where every other storefront is a pawn shop or a check-cashing place, and I drove it in complete silence. No radio. Just the engine and my own heartbeat filling up the cab of that truck. I thought about the night I proposed to Diane on the tailgate of my father's old pickup, parked at the edge of a wheat field outside of town. The ring box shaking in my hand nearly as bad as it had shaken 3 days earlier in my bedroom, finding it gone. I thought about the morning of her diagnosis, how she'd squeezed my hand in that cold exam room and said, "Well, at least we've got each other," like she was the one comforting me instead of the other way around. I thought about the promise I made her, unspoken, the day we lowered her into the ground under that maple tree, that I'd take care of our girl, that I'd do right by her even without Diane here to help me figure out what right looked like. Some promises you keep by giving everything you have. I was about to learn that some promises you only keep by finally taking something back. The shop was called Route 66 Gold and Loan. Bars on the windows, a bell over the door, fluorescent light buzzing overhead like a mosquito that never lands. I walked the length of the jewelry case, and my knees actually went soft when I saw it. Diane's ring, sitting under that ugly light next to a case of pawned guitars and a hunting rifle, tagged and priced like it had never meant a single thing to anybody. "Can I help you find something?" the man behind the counter asked. His name tag said Curtis. "That solitaire ring," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "Where'd that come from?" "Young fella brought it in Thursday. Said it was his grandmother's. Gave him $2,200 for it. $2,200. A ring that took me 11 months of hardware store profits to save for in 1987, handed over for a mower attachment payment. "That's my late wife's wedding ring," I said. "My son-in-law took it out of my house without asking." Curtis's whole face changed. He pulled out an intake log and a photocopy of a driver's license, and there was Grant's face staring back at me from a Xerox. "Look, sir," he signed a statement of ownership. Said it was inherited. "Under Oklahoma law, if this is stolen property, I've got to report it to the police, and they're going to need proof of ownership before I can release it to anybody but him." I've got the original appraisal, I told him, and photographs from 8 months ago. It's in my safe at home. Bring it, Curtis said. I'll call it in right now. 12 hours earlier, if you'd told me I'd be driving home to grab paperwork so a detective could put an official hold on my dead wife's wedding ring, I'd have told you that you had the wrong man entirely. I'd have told you I'd find some quiet way to fix it, the way I always did. I drove back 40 minutes later with the appraisal and the photographs in a manila folder on the seat beside me. The detective who met me there introduced himself as Officer Hale, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with the kind of tired patience that comes from 20-some years of hearing every version of every family falling apart. He took my statement right there at the counter, matched the inscription and the stone measurements against my paperwork, and filled out an evidence hold form in handwriting so neat it looked typed. Then he set his pen down and looked at me the way you look at a man you're about to ask something you already know the answer costs. Sir, I've got to ask you something, and I need you to sit with it a second before you answer. This is theft, and depending on how the DA wants to charge it, it could be a felony given the value and the fact that he signed a false ownership statement to pawn it. That's fraud on top of it. Your son-in-law is looking at real time if this goes the way it could go. Are you certain this is the road you want to go down? Because once I file this, there's no quiet way to pull it back. I stood there in that shop a long moment. I thought about 4 years of checks I'd written. I thought about Diane's hand in mine in that hospital room. I thought about a man who couldn't be bothered to help carry his mother-in-law's casket, but could let himself into my house to take the one thing I had left of her. Do it, I said. Hale nodded slow, the way a man nods when he's watched this exact decision get made a handful of times in his career, and it's never once gotten easier to witness. All right, we'll get the paperwork moving. He's not a flight risk, so this'll likely go through a summons rather than a warrant, but it's coming, and it's coming with his name on it. He looked at me then like maybe I was the one who ought to be ashamed. Like I was supposed to be the father-in-law who protects his family no matter the cost. But here's what nobody standing in that pawn shop understood. I had been protecting this family for 4 straight years, and all that protecting had built was a son-in-law who genuinely believed my money and my patience were bottomless, and a daughter who'd rather blame me than ask her husband a single hard question. Curtis handed the ring back to me in a small paper envelope. I held it a second before slipping it into my shirt pocket, right over my heart, the same pocket where I'd carried Diane's other ring, the plain band, the day I buried her. I drove home with the windows cracked, spring finally starting to push the last of winter out of the Oklahoma air. Somewhere on the highway, at a red light, I made the mistake, or maybe it wasn't a mistake at all, of opening Facebook. There was Grant, posted an hour earlier, standing next to a brand new zero-turn mower attachment hitched to his trailer, captioned, "Big things coming for Whitfield landscaping this spring. Grateful for the wins." While I sat at a red light with my dead wife's wedding ring in my shirt pocket, my son-in-law was posting about his wins with money he'd gotten from breaking mine. I didn't feel a shred of guilt looking at that post. I felt something closer to relief, like I'd been holding a hot coal in my bare hand for 4 years, telling myself the burn wasn't so bad, and I'd finally let it drop. I got home a little after 7 that evening. The house was quiet, same as it's been for 18 months. I went upstairs, opened the cedar box, and set the ring back exactly where it belonged. I closed the lid slow, the way you'd shut a door on a room you don't plan on revisiting for a while. 6 days later, that summons found its way to Grant, and the court date landed faster than either of them expected, given how these things usually crawl. Rachel called me the night before, begging me to drop the complaint, saying I was destroying her marriage over a piece of jewelry. I told her the same thing I'd tell her again, sitting in that courtroom. It was never about the jewelry, Rachel. It was about the 4 years before it. If you've been with me a while, you know I don't dress things up. Drop a comment if you're still here, and hit that like button before you go. It helps more than you'd think. The morning of the hearing, I got there early and sat in the front row. The same pew-style bench, I imagine, felt a lot like the one I sat in at Diane's funeral, hard and unforgiving in all the right places. Rachel came in 20 minutes later, in a gray dress, sat 2 rows back without a word to me, her jaw set tight the way her mother's used to get right before she said something she meant. Grant came in wearing a borrowed suit jacket that didn't quite fit through the shoulders, his lawyer beside him, a young public defender with a stack of folders under one arm. The prosecutor laid it out plain. Theft of property, pawn fraud through a false ownership statement, total value over $2,000, which in Oklahoma pushes it into felony territory. Grant's lawyer argued it was a misunderstanding between family, that he believed he had implied permission given the pattern of financial support over the years. I sat there and listened to a stranger try to explain away 4 years of my life in about 90 seconds, and it didn't land the way I think he hoped it would. The judge asked if the victim wished to make a statement, and I stood up. I told the court about a hardware store my father built and I kept alive. I told them about a wife who spent 11 months dying while her son-in-law couldn't be bothered to show up. I told them about a ring bought with a year of saved profits, and about the difference between a family helping each other and a family that had simply learned an old man wouldn't say no. I told them I said no exactly once in 4 years, and 9 days later that ring was gone. I watched Grant's face while I spoke. He didn't look up from the table the whole time. The judge accepted a plea deal that afternoon. Grant pled to a reduced charge, avoided the felony, but the deal came with restitution of the full appraised value, 6 months of probation, 100 hours of community service, and a permanent record that would follow him through every background check for the rest of his working life. Not prison. I want to be honest with you. I didn't need him in a cell. I needed him to understand, for the first time in 4 years, that there was a bottom to this well, and he'd finally hit it. Rachel wouldn't look at me as they walked him out through the side door. "Daddy, how could you do this to us?" she'd said earlier. And I still didn't have an answer that would have satisfied her, because the honest answer was, I didn't do anything to you. I just stopped doing everything for you. She called that night. I almost didn't pick up. Her contact photo on my phone is still one from 3 Christmases ago, back before all this, back when she used to hug me like she meant it. I answered on the fourth ring. "Dad." Her voice was already cracking. "Dad, he has to do community service now. His record's ruined. Do you understand what you did to us?" "I understand exactly what I did, Rachel." I told the truth. "You could have just let it go. It's a ring. Mom's gone. You said it yourself. She doesn't need it anymore." "No," I said, and my voice didn't shake, not once. For the first time in 4 years talking to my daughter, it didn't shake at all. "Your mother doesn't need it anymore. But I do. And so does the truth about what's been happening in this family since she died. You're supposed to protect us," she said, and she was crying now. The kind of crying I used to fold for instantly, the kind that used to send me straight to my checkbook. "I am protecting you, Rachel. Just not from the thing you think I should be protecting you from. I've been protecting you and Grant from consequences for 4 years. And look where it got all of us. Look where it got your marriage." She hung up on me. I sat there a long while afterward, looking at a dark phone screen, thinking about Diane, wondering what she'd say if she could see her daughter right now, defending a man who pawned her wedding ring for a mower attachment. I think she'd be heartbroken. I think she'd also understand, because she was the one who used to tell me, back before any of this, that love without a spine isn't love at all. It's just a man too scared to be told no back. The weeks after the hearing moved, the way consequences move, once you finally stop standing between people and the truth of their own choices. Grant's community service put him on road crews on Saturday mornings, picking up litter along the shoulder of the same highway his trucks used to drive. 2 of his biggest landscaping clients dropped him within the month once word got around, small towns being what they are. His business partner, a man named Deshaun who'd put his own money into that mower attachment as a loan to Grant, found out where the collateral for that loan had actually come from and pulled out of the partnership entirely. Rachel didn't speak to me for 5 weeks. I let her have the silence. I'd given her everything else for 4 years. I figured she was entitled to that much space to be angry. I did the work in those weeks I should have done a long time before. I finally sat down with my accountant and totaled up what I'd given the 2 of them since Diane's diagnosis. Just shy of $41,000. None of it ever paid back. None of it ever really acknowledged. I closed the joint emergency line of credit I'd foolishly co-signed for their business 2 years back. I told my accountant to stop the automatic transfer I'd been sending Rachel every month since the funeral. $300 I told myself was just for gas and groceries, and never once asked where it actually went. On a Sunday afternoon in the 6th week, Rachel showed up at the house. I watched her walk up the driveway through the front window, wearing the same gray dress from the courtroom, like she hadn't had it in her to change out of it in her mind, even if she'd changed out of it in fact. She knocked instead of using her key, which told me something before she'd even said a word. "Can we talk?" she asked, standing on the porch. I told her to sit, and we sat in the two chairs on the porch Diane used to keep geraniums between, empty now, just dirt in clay pots I hadn't had the heart to plant again. "I'm not here to ask you for anything," she said, before I could brace for it. "I just needed to say I've been so angry at you I couldn't see straight, and I think some part of me knew this whole time what Grant was doing with your money, and it was easier to be mad at you for stopping it than to be mad at him for taking it." I didn't say anything. I let her keep going. "He's not the man I thought he married," she said. "He blamed you the whole time. Never once said sorry to me for taking Mom's ring. Just kept saying you'd overreacted, that family doesn't call the police on family." And I believed him, because believing him was easier than admitting what our marriage actually looks like when nobody's writing checks to hold it together. I asked her the only question I really needed answered. "Are you safe, Rachel? Not financially. Are you safe with him?" She was quiet a long moment, and then she said she didn't know yet, but she was starting to ask herself that question for the first time, and that scared her more than anything else that had happened in the last 6 weeks combined. I told her I loved her. I told her that hadn't changed and it wasn't going to, no matter what happened next with her marriage. But I also told her I wasn't going to be the safety net that let either one of them avoid looking honestly at what they'd built, not anymore. That the kindest thing I could do for her now wasn't another check. It was finally, after 4 years, telling her the truth, even when it cost me her calling me the bad guy for a while. She cried on that porch, and this time I let her cry without reaching for my wallet to fix it. I just sat beside her. That evening after she left, I made myself a real dinner, not something reheated standing over the sink. Grilled a couple of pork chops on the little smoker out back, the kind Diane used to run every 4th of July while she hollered at me for hovering too close to her sauce. I sat out there and ate slow, listening to the neighborhood settle into evening, somebody's sprinkler running 2 yards over, a couple of kids on bicycles racing down Comanche Lane, the way Rachel used to race her own bike down this same stretch of road 30 years ago. Afterward, I went upstairs, opened the cedar box, and took the ring out one more time. I held it in my palm the way I used to before any of this happened, before a pawn shop and a courtroom and a daughter crying on my porch about a marriage neither of us knew yet how to save or how to let go of. I spent 4 years thinking if I gave my daughter and her husband everything, every dollar, every excuse, every quiet forgiveness, they'd stay close to me. They'd love me the way I loved them. But money never bought closeness. It just bought silence, and I mistook the silence for peace for far too long. I closed the box gently and set it back on the dresser. I didn't feel triumphant sitting there. I didn't feel angry either. I felt still, the particular stillness you only get to feel once you've finally put down something heavy you'd been carrying so long you'd forgotten it had a weight to it at all. My daughter is still figuring out what she wants her marriage to look like, and that's her road to walk, not mine to walk for her. But she called me last Sunday, just to talk, no number attached to the conversation, for the first time in longer than I care to admit. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing important at all, and when we hung up, she said, "Love you, Dad," the way she used to say it before all of this, before the money and the excuses and the ring. I finally have my daughter back, even if just a little. And Diane's ring is right where it belongs, sitting quiet in its box on my dresser, waiting for the day my daughter might be ready to wear it herself, once she's built something worth handing it down to. If this one hit home for you the way I think it might have, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me down in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one.